Rua tolu. Nongu masu kanyu sangandeva meu sere takarawa na yadai Jehovah I Jehovah niwu ke au manda nangangandre ni alongu aungai tangida nga Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah Hallelujah vua Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah Hallelujah vua Au sa waka wina ka waka lewu Wuna turanga Ena weka ke theongo Kena nona wembuli Ena nongo ngante ani Iau na tango maka na wanuango ya wilikina Na veisinga makawa sa otiani Ia endeitunga na waka wuli makawa Ko viti me tawa mundu Ena senga ni ali rawa Senga sara ni ali rawa Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah Hallelujah vu totale Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah mai waka Hallelujah Hallelujah vua Naka mani
Bulavanaka talo falava lo oingo Olivia Tauma. I'm also the Te Oliva manager here at Auckland Museum, and it is my honour and privilege to introduce our special guests today as part of the museum's very special Ngā Kākano series that we run here, that we've been running here for the last 4 years. So we welcome you all, as Matua Bobby has said, and we also we're acknowledging today with our guests that this is our kind of reigniting the fires of this talanoa, coming back into the museum after 2 years of our time at home, looking after our families and ourselves. So I just want to acknowledge you all in this presence, in this time, and making this travel to be here with us all and sharing this moment and this journey of our special guests today. And without further ado, I don't know if he needs any introductions, but I'm going to try and introduce Darren. Darren Kamali, Fijian, Uvean, Samoan, Scottish, and Pan-Pacific, let's just say Pan-Pacific writer and performer, prolific performer who reflects his multicultural background and upbringing from Fiji and Aotearoa, New Zealand. In his works, and he is also the Heritage Pacific Advisor at Auckland Libraries, and they are a great relationship with us as well. So I wanted to acknowledge Auckland Libraries tonight as well. And this is a hugely personal story and journey for Darren, and you'll be hearing from that tonight as he talks us through this. Also, I want to acknowledge Joanna Monolangi, creative Fijian artist for over 20 years, including our amazing Fijian masi and traditional dancewear, and teaching workshops for women's groups in the Fijian communities in Aotearoa. Awarded the Creative New Zealand Pacific Heritage Art Award in 2015, Joanna was also an integral knowledge holder in the museum's Fijian collections here with the Pacific Collection Access Project, and has played a key part in our wider community Pasifika relationships. Can we have a round of applause for each of Darren and Joanna? And next we have Oli Maiava, Senior Placemaker for Panuku Development, Auckland. Passionate about youth and community development. He's a practicing multidisciplinary artist, and he and Darren are the duo, the famous duo, Unregistered Savages of Aotearoa. I hope we see some of that tonight as well. So both Darren and Ollie also used to work here in the museum another lifetime ago, it feels, and that actually plays a part in the story that we will hear tonight and the connection to the museum, to this journey, as well as Joanna with our connection with the Pacific Collection Access Project and as a constant community advisor and guider in our spaces with our Fiji community and collections. So once again, please give a round of applause for our amazing speakers. And I will now hand it over to Darren. Whakatai te lelo.
Whawhitai Olivia. Mula vinaka ke menino marom wata kena turanga. O hera na ngone leo, ngone tangane, tuki ke ni koa. Ni mai reida nangu ulumate, ulutavu e tuki ke ni koa. Nangu edha na edhangu Darren Kamali, au susu mai suva. Tini kawitu na yambaki nungu mbula kia. Ge toki mai New Zealand. Nungu vasu I levuka o walau. Wata ke uvea mo futuna. Wata ke Samoa ke Walangi, Scotland. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. My name is Darren Kamali, like Olivia said before. It's awesome to have you all here tonight. Really great to do this in person as well, not on Zoom. But yeah, we're here, importantly, to talk about this uludavu, which is a generic Fijian term for wigs. But in terms of the ulumate, it's a practice. It's the whole ritual around the ulumate practice itself, in the making and in the collection, in the hair cutting and the whole process. But I will start off with a slideshow, and I want to welcome my two very special guests and special friends here who's helped me with this process. And together we're known as Na Tolu. So this is not just me, and I'm really grateful to have my two friends here today as well, Auntie Joanna and Ole Maiava. And please step in if you want, Auntie Joanna and Ole, when I'm talanoing, because I might miss some stuff as well. But as you can see, that's sort of my dreadlocks there. I cut it after 17 years. I was working here at the museum. I had my dreadlocks in 2013. And Ole is the person who got me this job as a Pacific educator, guest educator here. In 2013, I was about to cut my hair. I was going through a process at that time. And normally this hair cutting process starts with, it's like a mourning period as well. So when you're going through grief and stuff like that, then that's sort of the time where they do this practice called Ulumate Project. So yeah, and sort of bringing back the forgotten, it's part of Nandraune Ulu Tambu, which is the sacredness of human hair series that we are working on. It's a research, it's a RRA project, not Rwanda Revolution Army, but the Research Revival Art Activation process that began in 2013 when I first met Ollie. I was going to take my hair back to Fiji, cut it and plant it buried under a coconut tree, as most Pacific Islanders do. But then when I first saw the uludavu here on display at the Auckland Museum, I was like, so it resonated for me, and I was so inspired by the fact that after 17 years of cutting my hair, I can actually make something out of it that will be significant, not just to me, but to Fiji and to the Pacific as well, because sacredness of hair is not just Pacific Maori, it's also around the world, internationally. Because we don't go to just any person to cut our hair or touch our bodies. We actually go to masseuse, or we go to people, hairdressers, and everyone, I guess, has their own hairdressers. Otherwise, yeah, it's sort of sacred everywhere, and I wanted to keep that topic in place as well. So yeah, it's been 25 years of my hair growth. I started growing it in 1997. I came to New Zealand in 1992. I found art in 1997, and that's the reason I really started growing my hair, was to mark the beginning of my my art practice, which is when I started basking on on the streets of CBD Auckland. So yeah, that's been 25 years in the process. I normally comb my hair. You can see that little plastic bag on the side. Normally during the time after the cut of the dreadlocks, so obviously you can't comb your hair when you got dreadlocks. So after the 17 years since 2014, I've been combing my hair and keeping all the little strands that come out of the comb, as well as cutting my hair a couple of times. So I think in the last 25 years, I've cut my hair maybe 3 times for this special collection as well. It didn't come to, like I said, it didn't come consciously in the first years leading up to 2013, but from 2013, which is 9 years ago, I've been really conscious about this project. And Ole, I explained to Ole first in advance when I saw him. Yeah, and then I saw Auntie Choana Monalangi, who was at my haircutting ceremony in 2018 at the Auckland Central Library, and she offered to, if I wanted to make, she just asked if I wanted her to make this uludavu wig, which she hasn't ever tried to make. She used to do crocheting, but I can leave it to Auntie Choana to talk about later. And yeah, I gave my hair to Auntie Choana for 13 months, so it lived at her place, and she groomed it and she made it into a wig, which is made of coconut sinnet, which is called mangi mangi in Fijian. And also, if you see the inside, you would see little like black strings or cotton. That is actually the vau, which is from the hibiscus stem, that holds it all together, and you can have a look at it closer when you come to it. So the top part is about, yeah, it's about 9 years or 9 years of my hair collection, and the bottom part is 17 years, which is 25 altogether, and there's 25 tombes, called in Fijian is dreadlock, or is plaited hair. So yeah, Auntie Choana spent 14 months making that, and that's what it looks like when I wear it from the back as well. Yeah, this is the first one in the 21st century. It hasn't been made for at least over 200 years, over 2 centuries. And that's why it's very special to bring it here today and to talanoa about it and give it a bit of life. And Auntie Choana can, if you want to say anything, just jump in, Auntie. But otherwise, we can always come back to it later. So pre-colonization, it was our pre-Christian times. That would have been, yeah, probably early 1800s, before the missionaries come through as well. I mean, it was 1700s when Captain Cook came through. But yeah, 1800s is when they started collecting it. But it's normally harvested from warfare, and it's harvested and it's worn again to the next war. Also worn until the hair below grows back. So it's a mourning process. You're actually grieving and mourning the loss of your family, your friends, especially if it's a chief. And yeah, and you wear it for Bongin Drau, which is, you see at the bottom, that's the mourning period. Bongin Drau is 100 nights, and that's the time it gives your hair underneath to grow back, and that's the period of time that sort of you are in that grieving period and mourning period. And it happens with also with funerals. In Fiji, you have the Mbongi Va, you have the Mbongi Tini, and then which is the 4th night, the 10th night, and then the 100th night, which marks the end of that period. And normally during that period, you don't cut your hair, or you don't shave your beard. You actually give up other stuff like kava or European kava, which I am going through at the moment. There's been a few deaths in the last couple of months, so I thought I would take up the 100 nights. And being dry July as well, I started at the beginning. At least my wife still supports me with her red wine. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's sort of 3 weeks, 4 weeks now into the 100 nights. It'll finish maybe September, sometime end of September. So yeah, that's normally the time they wear this uludavu wig during that period. Masks, we came back. We went to Cambridge Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology in UK. They've got 8 uludavus in their collection, which makes that more than our collection in Fiji, which is only 6 uludavus, and a couple of tombes, which is the virgin plaits of women who wear little plaits to the side. But Ole and I wanted to give some faces to those, or make some masks for those hair, for those uludavus that we saw in Cambridge. So we did 8 masks each, And this couple of masks was from, you can see it in front here. The back of it was molded. It was molded of masi. This is a masi kuvui, which is brown masi. Auntie Joanna can talk to that later as well. But normally the sap of the mangrove is boiled, and this is soaked into it to make it look like it's smoked. And the other one is masivula with ink on it. So this is Chinangu. Chinangu means mother. It's actually 2 poems that I wrote that I'll read out later. And it's actually the process that my mom went through in doing her 7 weeks of chemotherapy for her throat cancer. My mom is here tonight. It's also to be here. Thank you, Mom. And so that which is similar to Ole's one, he can talk about that later. His niece had the same the same illness. So she had to go through that, and he'd done his own masks with it. And I've called this one Tinangu and Super Tinangu, so Mom and Super Mom, yeah. And it's it's in that poem that I'll share later. Going back to the sacredness of hair, and just wanted to use this as an example. So to the right there, to the left, you can see the mountain warriors, Bati, they're called Bati. And that was taken in 1873, so about 246 years, 47 years ago. And that's Reverend Thomas Baker. He was actually a good friend of the chiefs of the village. And I'm just showing the example of how sacred hair was at that time. And this was, 73. Wow. That was after the printing and stuff that was happening around the Pacific in Cook Islands. But so he this particular time, he was supposed to go back to Britain. He had sort of lost his placing and all, but he wanted to do one more mission into the highlands. So if you see Kaitholo, Kaitholo means the highlands of Fiji. And mainly, if you look at the Fijian map, I'll show it later, it's actually the mid area of Viti Levu, where we both come from, but it's in the interior more. And Reverend Thomas Baker, he went into that certain village, and he did his mission, and it was all good. The story is online, so you can always Google it up. The family came in 2003 to take the remains of Thomas Baker back. He actually was good friends with the chief, but he did the terrifying mistake of touching the chief's head in terms of trying to take the comb from the chief's head, which was his comb, but he had all the congregation and the warriors sitting there as well. And the chief said, don't mind, but they were all really, offended by that action. And so they were like, okay, so they didn't do anything until he went out to the bathroom, and they actually took him out. And 8 of his followers, who were Itauke, indigenous Fijians, who took him into the forest, they actually slaughtered them and then cooked them and ate them just for touching the hair, and that's how sacred the hair was at the time and still is today. In saying that, his remains has been returned back, reconciliation. 2003, the Baker family came from UK and the Fijian village up in Nasova. They actually did the whole reconciliation and giving back of the bones. But one very interesting fact about that time was they actually tried to cook his boots. They boiled it for ages, and that was at the Museum of Fiji for ages because they thought it was it was like a meat or something, and obviously it wasn't. So they kept his bones in boots, and I think they've given it back in 2003. But it's actually sorry not to make but it's actually just showing the how sacred it is and Christianity was strong at that time as well. So most of the villages that Baker went to, they were supposed to sort of try and take him out because they had a message on a tambo. I think you saw my son wearing a tambo, which is a whale's tooth. It's very precious in Fiji. So that tambo was going across to all the villages saying to kill the white man as he comes through. But most of them were Christians, so they didn't want to go through that tambo process as well until it reached that place. And then they wanted to stop it, but couldn't take that sort of picture out of their head of this person, foreigner, touching the Fijian man's head or Ratu's head. So that was pretty... And then, so this story tells about how whereabouts this Uludavo come from. And we're talking about those little places like the Vatu Sila people in Nanganga Delawatu village in Nandronga, Auntie. So that's part of Singatoka, where we see Singatoka Valley right up to Nandrau. So all these names that you see up there will come onto that map there. So we're looking at the interior of Fiji, which is Viti Levu, the big island on the left. Viti Levu means the great island or big island. And then you can see the central part where he mentions before. Sorry, I come down here. Nandrau, all up this area here. Oops, too close. Oh, there. So all up in the top. Nandrau, and you'll see Wainimala River. I guess if you can blow it up a bit more, you can see. But it's mainly up in the highlands that you see those Kaidolos or people from the highland Dolo. And most of the rivers, like Singatoka River, Reo River, Wainimala River, they all lead up to this place where they practice Ulumate and Uludavu making. And this is what's happening from now on. So the next talk, Ulumate Project Na Tolu, which is the three of us, where to from here? October 5th, we're looking at a heritage festival at the Auckland Central Library at the Whare Wananga, and that's during Fijian Language Week, but it's also during the Heritage Festival, which is awesome to have it up there. And then we're looking at a date for our object space. We're going to have an exhibition at Object Space, so this should be on exhibition and featuring all three of our works, along with a sort of catalog photography. Ole does photography, so we'll be working on some other projects to lead up to that the date for 3 months. I want to say a big thank you to CNZ as well. Creative New Zealand has funded most of our works and is also funding this next step of our work, which is, I want to just give a special shout out to them, and also to Auckland Museum for sure. This is the first place. It's very, this is really important what we're doing here today, because we'll use it as a template to take to other GLAM sector institutions, mainly museums and art galleries. And we'll use this similar kind of setup and sort of protocols and template to move forward. And also I want to thank all the individuals, thank my family, my wife, my children for the inspiration as well, and all the individuals that help us all along the way. And there's so many of them, wonderful support. And yeah, and this has been 9 years in the process, and we're looking forward to, we've signed a contract with Object Space, and they will, we're looking to a national tour next year. And yeah, we're still talking about it with them at the moment. But in saying that, that's my little spill, little section, and we can have a bit more talanoa later. Yeah, later in the night. Nakawali.
Pulavinaka, everyone. Of course, all of you are not no stranger to me. It's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this project. Darren and I had a talanoa, and from his first haircutting, a second haircutting, and I said to him if he wants to create uluzavu or ulumate with his own hair, I'm there for him. So it's here. It was a challenge for me to make something like this, but because I've never made it before. And I've never seen it till I came to be part of, Ole had brought us into working here before the PCAP project. And through PCAP, that's where I saw the Ulumate. And yes, and of course, fast forward, my knowledge of crocheting, going to a Catholic school back home, back in the day, came into practice when I crocheted the mangi-mangi, or the coconut sennet, into the wig cap, and then sewed the hair onto the cap itself. Darren's hair is very fine, very different from my Fijian hair. I had to spread some of the hair that he had over the cap, hand sewed it with needle and cotton, and then sewed the other pieces, the bigger pieces on, and fastening it with the hibiscus, wild the hibiscus fibre, the vau. It lived in my house for a bit because we came into lockdown. So it just sat there in the sitting room, and my hubby kept saying to me, when is this thing going to go? When are you going to finish it? I said, well, it's not going anywhere. We're facing lockdown right now. But it would have just taken no more than 4 weeks to make. But then it took a year
to pick up 13 months.
6 months to make, and then he was waiting on me to tell him it's ready, and I was waiting on him to call me. So we were waiting on each other. Come New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, yeah.
And we came together home, had our little get-together and handed over the Ulumate. But yes, it's a wonderful journey for me personally, thinking of our ancestors and why the Ulumate was created, was made. It wasn't for anything horrible, terrible, like, stories that we hear, but it was significant to that mourning period. What the young men went through, especially if you're a son of a chief. Of course, when he passes, you will lose your hair, but it's saved. They make the wig out of it. So when he leaves the house, he wears it so no one can say, oh, that's the chief's son, or so on. And if he went with the others, with the Azambati, the warriors, into war, he would wear the wig to disguise him. Otherwise, he'll be captured and eaten, I guess. But yes, that's me for the Ulumate. It is a pleasure to be part of these guys, their journey. Minaka.
Nakaensi. Te rau tuna?
Malo lava whaftai mo le avanua, mua au te whiawe le viinga i le nganga wha tupu nuu. Ia nganga ko kongu mea uma, i le langi ma le lalo langi. Au te whiawe le wha tūlou i tātou tupuna, ua whai le malanga i matano whia i a pulotu. Tūlou. Au te awe le wha whawhetatai i le kanata whenua, mo le avanua, I le mamalu ma le pa'i o le whale lea. Whaftai. I just want to acknowledge the creative force of the universe, the force that is in all things above and below the heavens. I just want to acknowledge all of our ancestors that have made that magnificent journey to Pulotu. And I just want to acknowledge the customary owners, the custodians of this whenua that we're on, for allowing us to have a voice here in Aotearoa, and just following the first Indigenous holiday ever. It's such a privilege to be in this country, and I always say, what a country. What a country. Yeah, we have a few problems, but hey, we're getting there, It's all about the growth. My journey is a little bit different in this project. It goes way back to me growing up in Porirua. I used to be a chess player, and when I was 13, I was a third former at college in Porirua, and I was actually the top of my chess team at the college, and I beat the Ducks when I was 13. I'm saying this because it's about strategy, and it's always been about strategy for me. But it was also that time that I began to think about art and light and photography. I found a camera when I was quite young. I was about 10, in a house that my uncle had moved into. And I, as a little tutu, went around all the cupboards looking in them, in the new house, and I found an Instamatic camera. And my uncle said, you could have that. So that was my first go at actually beginning to take photos. And when I would save my money and then get a little cartridge that you put into Instamatic, and then if I had enough money, I'd get it processed. And that's when I started playing with light, because I think photography is all about light. I was also exploring drama, and I started as a lighting assistant at Mana Little Theatre in Plimmerton, and started working as a lighting guy. And then that just made my whole eye go towards light. And so I've always been thinking about taking photos and the use of available light. So this project enabled me to be an artist. I've always wanted to be an artist, but there was never a place where I could feel like I was an artist. Because there was always something missing, either in the management of such a thing or the fact that there was no other brown people in that type of art. So I've done a lot of things around catalysing art and trying to open up doors to other Pacific and Māori artists to explore spaces where we don't usually find ourselves. And so this project, thanks to these two wonderful people to my right, allowed me to explore being an artist. My oldest boy makes money from art, and that's his whole life. And so I live vicariously through him as well. But I'm also hoping that maybe I help play a part in that. My daughter works within television, and I did a lot of TV work back in the day, back in the 80s. I used to make TV programs. And so my daughter is now following me in that footsteps. And my wife and I, we both did computer operating and programming in the 70s. And so our youngest boy is now a analyst and a developer in IT. And I say this because all of what we try to do here is to open up the door to all our young people to see the most amazing things that our ancestors have been able to achieve. And that's just by giving it a go. And so I'm just had this beautiful sort of journey with these two, going over to Cambridge, being able to travel through to the different museums and seeing our taonga in those spaces, but also being challenged with how am I going to photograph this in a way that's also going to give us something that's slightly different to what happens in museums. And also about how do we attract our young people to begin to start looking at some of these things that have been forgotten. And that's where I feel really privileged to be here tonight. And to come back into my old stamping grounds. I was I was the senior outreach programmer here, and the idea was to take the museum out to the community. And on that occasion, we did quite a lot of work with young people, had 18,000 young people through our courses that we'd run in the time that I was here. And it was again about bringing back the forgotten, coming into these spaces where our taonga are held, and then just seeing the different practices. Like in Cambridge, the sun source of colonisation, maybe, can I go as far as to say that? We were allowed to actually touch the taonga with our hands. That's very different to being here in Aotearoa. In Aotearoa, even in this museum, we can't touch any of our taonga. We need to have gloves on, even in Te Papa. But those are some of the things that we began to see over there, and thought, well, maybe we need to get this practice, try and revive it, and at the same time sort of encourage young people to start looking back into their histories, into the amazing journeys of our ancestors. So that's me, and I'm really thankful to be part of this team in bringing back the forgotten. And I just want to talk a wee bit about the masks and what we had done. And it was always about testing and playing with materials. And so this is tapa. And originally we were thinking about how would we mould masks. It was quite funny when we did go over to Cambridge. This is before lockdown. Darren and I created a tapa piece, and it's called
Many masks, no face.
Many masks, no face. And we created it, and it looks a lot like people wearing COVID masks. And so we were in London before the COVID lockdown, and had these. It was almost like it was a conspiracy of the ancestors to bring us all together in this space. And so we then came back and went straight into lockdown, and we had originally planned to run have our first exhibition based on our masks and the research and the the stories that we'd found while travelling, looking at these taonga in other spaces. And so this is a Tapa Mask that I made with an old tamure dancers sort of rattle. And I always like to repurpose things. And it was based originally on a king crab. And I really liked the idea of a king crab running across the ground. And then I thought, oh, king crab needs red hair and yellow, as the royal family always does. So that's how that began. And then we thought, I wonder if we could mould tapa. And as Darren was saying, this horrible thing called cancer that is beginning to affect us in the days of old when cancer first started making its sort of movement into the human race. I was quite young, and I was born in the 50s, so it was all sort of new to me, but it was always over there. But now it's in my family, and it's taken 50 years to come here. And so it started off with my mother-in-law getting the same throat process that Darren's mum had. And that's how it started. We said, we need to make a mask. We need to talk about these things. Why are we getting this stuff? Are we holding in things that we should really let go of? And so, again, as artists, we began to explore that. And my mother-in-law, who never throws anything away, actually threw hers away, one of these, and that was the one that I was going to use for our original exhibition. But then I found out that my niece had cancer as well, and sadly she passed away during the making of these ulumate and things, and so I used her cancer mask, I suppose, and we moulded masks with it. And so this was the first iteration of what that could look like. And in my masks, when we were talking about this, my son's a tattooist, my oldest boy. And so in the tattooist process for Samoans, you usually have a saw, someone else to also go through the journey with you. And so for all of my masks, I made a saw. So one mask was for display, and the other mask was to stay at home and do the work that needs to be done at home. And so all of the masks that sat there worked from my process in that idea of having someone else in that space. And so I was allowed to, take the photos myself, choose the colours between us, and we wanted to talk about climate change. So all the colours are climate change colours. They're all sort of earth blues and greens and browns. And then the idea of taking the photos also then spurred us, how do you frame something in this process? How do you tell a story in this process? Because the original book we were going to do was going to be almost like a museum piece. But through this journey, when we got to London and into East Anglia, one of the lecturers there, Stephen Hooper and Katrina Iggulden, said, you should actually turn this into a PhD, Darren. So that changed our approach. And so this book then suddenly became an artistic response to the ulumate that we found in Cambridge, also at the Horniman Museum, and also at the Royal Maritime Museum in Greenwich, which we even got to run workshops there for 2 weeks while we were in London. And that we found this piece here at the back of the book. It had not been open for 130 years, and they let us actually open it. Yeah, so I was going to show some images, but that'll be another time, and you would have been able to see some of those things. So we got to open this and pull it out of its container, and actually try and open up the Ulumate mask hairpiece, which is stored inside out, inside a net made of vo, or hibiscus bark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Oh, so those were the 8 that were in there. This thing I actually was meant to put this on at the start because I've made it for 10 minutes, and so my talk was going to go for 10 minutes. And when I saw the last piece, I knew that was my time to shut up. Otherwise, I talk for far too long. But yeah, I'll leave that up there because we're going to do a reading, if that's all right. From the book. Yeah. We do have a copy available. It was quite funny about us getting into this because these are our first editions, and there was only 300 copies made.
Thanks to CNZ.
And we wanted to make it out of something that wasn't a first edition. It was all floppy. Our next ones are all going to be hardcover, and they'll be cheaper than this one. We've got some poems in here that we would love to read out, if that's all right. Cool? Darren, do you want to do the first one? So we'll get Darren to read some, and then Joanna's got one in there that we'll read, and then I'll finish off, and then let's have something to eat. And after we get to bless the food. Yeah.
Just going back to those 2 matas you saw up there, the mask of my mum, of molded mask. It's called tinangu and super tinangu. I try to make this one like a morning one as well. Chiloma. And it goes, tinangu, smoked masi from the mata plastiki. Tinangu, smoked face from the plastic mask. Tinangu, a mask to remember you, to remember your suffering. Tinangu, 7 weeks of radiation, 7 days in the hot sun. Tinangu, so massive is your courage, so great is your sacrifice. Tinangu, so fierce your suffering, yet you smile through it all. Tinangu, Mother Mana, warrior queen. Tinangu, your sorrow I share, your song I sing. Na tinangu. And the next one is super tinangu. It goes, super tinangu. She is Marama Ganga. She is super tinangu. She smiles through smoked flesh and broken teeth. She is Mata, and Mata is her. She is face, and face is her. Do not stare, she sees through souls. Watch her hands, she makes salu-salus on crystal sands. She is Super Marama from the mystical isle of Mburutukula. Super Tinangu can take you anywhere. All you need to do is kere kere.
Okay.
Some of those pictures, I don't know if you saw, but you could actually see that there was also knits in the hair. Did you see that? They were there for 300 years.
Yeah, some of those ancient knits.
Ancient knits in there. And we did have someone who said to us, do you think you'd ever do a DNA test of the hair in the wigs? We never know. Joanna.
I wrote a Fijian one and translated it in English, and it goes, Ulumate. Viti na ngau na makawa meu rai lesu, o ira nangase nei talanoa meu seretaka. Nonda vanua, nonda I tovo me maroroi, rai lesu ina nonda I talanoa makawa. Ulumate... Ulumate, rakilai tani kina nondangase, rauni ulu, vau, mangi era taliwata. Gai uku na iseru tawa, Ulumate ni ngauna ni viti makawa. Na vei vale ni miau maroroi vea sai pura e randambe kina. Na onda ulumate ni viti makawa e ramaroroi tukina e salu ni veti kina ni nonda vanua ni ngauna ni kua. Looking back to old Fiji, our stories, our ancestors, our families, our land, vanua, our home, our heritage, time, stories, and our history. Ulumate, human hair, ancestry wigs. Vau, wild hibiscus fibers. Mangi, coconut senet, ropes tightly woven. Rauniulu, human hair adorns the netting. Take shape, ancestry wigs. Museum around the world, our ancestry wigs are found. Talanoa, conversations arise. Different shapes, size, and styles. Ulumate, Fijian wigs, adorn our time, woven tightly in our bloodlines. People and provinces signify through our garlands worn by people of modern time.
I think I'll just do two of these little quick ones. These are from Maka Superhero. Comic book teacher, hero or preacher, lightness. Reaching out of the paper, your superpowers caper, wearing your wig to war, darkness. Aroused in store on a foreign shore, locked behind museum door, freedom. Nose flute key sets you free. Blue water superheroes surf the rising tides. Te ngaru matua connects the ancestors through ancient power collides. Alter ego, where do the free go? Masked up in isolation, world stood still by virus conflagration. Some hide behind steeples. The real superheroes are the ordinary peoples. And then I'll just read a couple from the Maka o le Sifi Aiku. A conspiracy of the ancestors in a time full of testers, stealing with their eyes and ears, amoeba gene pool steers, gestating in a quantum entanglement puzzle, red feathered spear peering down an iron blue muzzle. Seeded in a flower bed in grey lin, hoping to gentrify the goodness within. Kamaku, le maka o le sifi aiku, tamatu, here to keep guard over you. Make me laugh, make me cry, make me understand why. Connected by a family tree, riding a va'aloa smelly like the sea. The chief of ghosts keeps her secrets close, woven from the ancient roots of whaangongo, captured by young ears that whaalongo, hearing their grandmother's words on the wind. One day, all our fish will be tinned.